Rimuru back 3000 year as a fifth true dragon. By Elite X0. Chapter 9, New Start. Third-person POV. High above the dense canopy of the god's mountain forest, the skies were momentarily calm, only to be disturbed by the swift, graceful flight of a mid-sized dragon. Its scales were a deep, dark purple that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. The void dragon, Rimuru, soared through the air with effortless ease, his serpentine body cutting through the clouds as if they were nothing more than mist. But then, a booming laugh echoed through the heavens. Ku-ha-ha-ha-ha. The sound was thunderous, carrying a playful yet ominous tone that shook the very air. From above, a much larger dragon suddenly descended. The scales shimmered like an endless storm. With a swift, precise movement, it unleashed a mighty storm blade attack, slicing through the atmosphere with terrifying power. Rimuru dodged with a roll in the air, narrowly avoiding the massive blade of wind that carved a path through the sky. He looked up with a grin that could only be described as mischievous. "Is that all you've got, Veldora? I expected more from the great storm dragon." The larger dragon, none other than Veldora, roared in response, but it was a sound filled with mirth rather than rage. "Ha! You wish. I was just warming up, little brother." Veldora's voice boomed as he flapped his colossal wings, generating a gale that sent the trees below swaying violently. With that, the two true dragons clashed, their bodies spiraling around each other in a deadly dance. Each strike from Veldora was met with equal force from Rimuru, who responded with his own attacks. The skies around them were soon filled with the sounds of their battle, a cacophony of wind, void energy, and draconic roars. Rimuru countered Veldora's storm blade with a swift void strike, his claws glowing with dark energy as he deflected the attack, sending shockwaves through the air. The impact of their clash sent ripples through the clouds, parting them in every direction. "Is that the best you can do, old man? You're getting slow," Rimuru teased, his voice carrying a light-hearted tone despite the ferocity of their fight. Veldora's laughter rumbled like thunder. "Old man? Watch your mouth, brat, or I'll make you eat those words." He twisted his massive body, generating a cyclone blast that spiraled toward Rimuru, a vortex of destructive wind intent on overwhelming him. But Rimuru was quick, weaving through the air with unparalleled agility. He summoned void tendrils from the darkness around him, shadowy appendages that whipped through the air, wrapping around the cyclone and tearing it apart before it could reach him. "You'll have to try harder than that, Veldora. I'm not some little dragon you can push around." The storm dragon roared, more in amusement than anger, and retaliated with a barrage of tempest spears, bolts of lightning and wind that shot toward Rimuru at blinding speed. Rimuru grinned, crossing his arms as he unleashed his black hole invocation. A small void of darkness manifested between them, pulling the spears into its depths and neutralizing them instantly. The battle continued with intensity, but any observer could see that neither of them was truly fighting to kill. They were toying with each other, pushing boundaries, but always with a hint of playfulness that spoke to the deep bond they shared. For these two, the Clash of Titans was nothing more than a game, a test of strength, skill, and wit. Just as Rimuru was about to unleash his shadow flame blast, a blinding light flashed between them. Both dragons instinctively halted their attacks, their eyes narrowing as a figure appeared at the center of their battlefield. The air around him shimmered with an otherworldly presence. As the light faded, they saw him, a figure with the appearance of an androgynous man of modest stature, with black hair and blue eyes that seemed to pierce through the very soul. His long hair was littered with white specks that made it resemble the night sky, giving him an ethereal, almost divine aura. The moment the figure appeared, both Rimuru and Veldora felt a chill run down their spines, despite their near-invincible power. They started to sweat heavily, a rare occurrence for beings of their caliber. The figure crossed his arms, his expression a mixture of sternness and disappointment. "Honestly, you two, you're causing a ruckus in the skies like a couple of fledglings. Do you have any idea what kind of damage you're doing?" Veldora shrank back slightly, his enormous form somehow seeming smaller under the figure's gaze. "Ah, Come on, Brother Veldanava, we were just having some fun, right? Rimuru, who usually had a quick retort ready, found himself at a loss for words. He sheepishly scratched the back of his head in his dragon form, his tail swaying in slight embarrassment. Yeah, just some brotherly bonding, you know? Nothing serious. Veldanava, the creator god and their older brother, let out a long sigh. You're both incorrigible. Now, enough playing around. We have a mission, remember? Both dragons nodded quickly, not daring to argue. The playful atmosphere from before was gone, replaced by a more serious, focused energy. Without another word, Veldanava began to ascend, leading the way eastward. Rimuru and Veldora exchanged a glance, one that held both excitement and a bit of trepidation, before they followed him. The three figures cut through the sky like shooting stars as they headed toward the Eastern Empire. Rimuru's POV. The wind rushed past as I flew through the skies above God's mountain forest, the familiar landscape a blur beneath me. The tranquility of the moment was shattered when I sensed a sudden shift in the atmosphere. My instincts flared, and just in time, I twisted my body, narrowly dodging a massive storm blade attack that sliced through the air where I had just been. The blade's wake left a shimmering trail of energy, crackling with raw power. Quahahaha! Veldora's laughter echoed through the sky, booming and full of mischief. I glanced over my shoulder to see the massive figure of the storm dragon, easily twice my size, grinning at me with that wild look in his eyes. Veldora! I called out, unable to suppress my own smile. You trying to kill me? Or just itching for a rematch? Neither. Veldora roared back, his voice filled with excitement. Just keeping you on your toes, little brother. I rolled my eyes but couldn't deny the thrill that was building within me. It had been a few months since Veldora and I had our first real encounter. Though it wasn't anything particularly special, it marked the beginning of a bond that had grown quickly. Despite his wild nature, Veldora had accepted me immediately, as a friend, a brother, and a fellow true dragon. Our shared nature made us close, and our playful battles had become a routine, each one more exhilarating than the last. Today was no different. I could feel the void energy within me pulsing in response, eager for the challenge. It had taken time, but I had learned to control it, mastering the ultimate skill, Chaos Lord of the Void, under Veldanava's guidance. With that control came a sense of freedom, a chance to finally stretch my wings, literally and figuratively, without fear of losing control. Veldora, on the other hand, had recently managed to control half of his aura, which meant he was less of a walking catastrophe and more of a regular one. It also meant he was allowed to meet me freely, something we both relished. As we soared through the sky, Veldora unleashed another attack, this time a flurry of storm blades aimed directly at me. I dodged and weaved through the barrage, the thrill of the battle tingling down my spine. The blades were close enough that I could feel their energy prickling against my scales, but Veldora was holding back just enough to make it fun without being lethal. You're getting slow, Veldora, I taunted, sending a blast of shadow flame his way in retaliation. The dark flames crackled as they shot through the air, their void-infused energy distorting the space around them. Slow, Veldora bellowed, dodging the flames with a barrel roll that shook the sky. You're just getting cocky. Our banter continued as we clashed again and again, neither of us putting our full strength into it, but doing enough to keep things interesting. Each exchange was met with laughter, the sheer joy of the battle evident in every movement. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a terrifying display of power, two true dragons locked in combat, but to us it was nothing more than a game. But then, as we prepared for another round, something shifted. The air around us grew heavy, the atmosphere thick with an energy that was neither mine nor Veldora's. We both froze mid-air, the tension palpable. Then, without warning, a figure appeared between us, effortlessly stopping our battle. It was as if the very fabric of reality had parted to allow his entrance. The figure was androgynous, with a modest stature, black hair that shimmered like the night sky, and piercing blue eyes that held an unfathomable depth. Both Veldora and I instinctively backed off, our playful banter dying on our lips as the reality of who stood before us sank in. The power radiating from him was overwhelming, far beyond anything we could muster. Despite his calm demeanor, we could feel the weight of his presence pressing down on us. "Big brother," I whispered, my voice barely audible, as Veldora and I both broke out in a cold sweat. Veldanava's gaze swept over us, his expression a mixture of exasperation and mild amusement. "You too," he began, his voice as steady as a calm ocean. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" I swallowed hard, realizing with a jolt that we had completely lost track of time in our little skirmish. We were supposed to be heading to the Eastern Empire for an important gathering, one that Veldanava himself had called. Veldora and I shared a glance, our faces pale as the weight of our oversight hit us like a ton of bricks. Oops, Veldora ventured, his voice sheepish. "Oops," Veldanava echoed, raising an eyebrow. "You two nearly forgot, didn't you?" We both nodded, feeling like scolded children despite our status as true dragons. Veldanava sighed deeply, but there was a fondness in his eyes as he looked at us. "Come on," he said, his tone softening slightly. "Let's not keep everyone waiting." Without another word, we turned and followed Veldanava toward the Eastern Empire, our playful banter replaced by a shared sense of urgency. As we approached the castle, Veldora and I shifted into our human forms. While we met, I also assisted him in obtaining a human form. Veldora, now sporting blonde hair and a towering, muscular frame, glanced over at me with a grin. "Guess we'll have to finish our battle another time." "Huh?" I smirked back, though the tension still lingered. "You're on." As we descended upon the castle gates, the guards bowed deeply, their reverence evident as they greeted us. We moved swiftly through the halls, making our way to the chamber where the gathering was to take place. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on my mind, but I forced myself to focus on the present. We entered the chamber and took our seats, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. 10 of us were present, including myself. Among us were the 5 true dragons, Rudra, Lucia, Guy, and my 2 subordinates, Ignis and Frigidus. Veldanava's POV. As I stood before them, I could feel the tension in the room, the weight of what I was about to reveal hanging heavily in the air. I took a deep breath, my gaze sweeping over each of them, my family, my closest allies. And then I spoke. "The reason I've called you all here today," I began, my voice steady but tinged with a note of finality, "is because there's something important I need to share. Lucia is pregnant." The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. Gasps of surprise echoed around me, but none were more profound than Rimuru's. His eyes widened in disbelief, and I could see the emotions warring within him: happiness, sadness, confusion. His smile was dry, forced, as if he were trying to process what this meant. But before anyone could fully react, I continued, pressing on before the weight of my decision could crush me. "With this news, I've made another choice. I've decided to reside in the Rudra Kingdom, also known as the Nazca Kingdom, as its king. And I'll be marrying Lucia." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. I could feel the shock and disbelief radiating from everyone. Their eyes locked onto me as they struggled to comprehend what I had just said. But it was Rimuru's reaction that struck me the most. The sadness in his eyes was almost unbearable, but there was happiness there too, though it was tainted by something darker, frustration, perhaps. He knew more than anyone what this decision meant, and I could see the conflict in him, the struggle to accept what he couldn't change. Before he could speak, I pressed on, knowing that I had to say it all now before I lost my nerve. "Rimuru will be the new ruler and guardian of God's Mountain, just as Degrul guards the Heavenly Star Palace. And I've given up almost all of my power. I've chosen to live a mortal life. From now on, I'm no longer the strongest. I'm just a man." The room erupted in a flurry of emotions. Shock, disbelief, confusion. They couldn't believe what I was saying, couldn't understand why I would make such a choice. But Lucia, the only one who knew of my decision beforehand, remained calm, her gaze steady as she looked at me. Rimuru, however, was another story. His eyes held a depth of sadness that I hadn't seen before, but there was also anger there, frustration at the knowledge he held. The future he knew would come to pass but could do nothing to change. I knew he was struggling, fighting against the urge to speak out, to protest, but he held his tongue. In the end, he simply smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes, and offered me a dry congratulations for my future marriage and child. It was enough for now. Rimuru's POV. Veldanava's words hit like a hammer, shattering the fragile calm I tried to maintain. The room was so silent that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Lucia, pregnant, and Veldanava, giving up his power? A mortal life? The words echoed in my mind, twisting into something dark and suffocating. I felt the weight of the future I knew crashing down on me. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Veldanava, the god of gods, reduced to a mortal life. It was like watching the stars fall from the sky. I wanted to scream, to shout that this wasn't right, that he was making a terrible mistake. But I couldn't. I was bound by time, shackled by the knowledge of what was to come. The fate of the world was in my hands, and yet I was powerless to change a single thing. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms. The dry smile I forced onto my face was a pathetic attempt to mask the turmoil inside. My voice, when it finally came, sounded hollow, distant. Congratulations, big brother? And to you too, Lucia. The words tasted bitter. I hated this. I hated that I couldn't do anything to stop the future from unraveling in front of me. Veldanava's eyes met mine, and I knew he saw through my facade. He always did. Veldora's POV. When Veldanava dropped that bombshell, it felt like the world stopped spinning. Lucia pregnant? And Big Brother giving up his power? For what? To live as a mortal? I stared at him, trying to wrap my head around it, but nothing made sense. I glanced at Rimuru, expecting him to be just as confused, but what I saw in his eyes was far worse. Pain, frustration, and something that looked a lot like fear. Rimuru was always so calm, so sure of himself. Seeing him like this sent a chill down my spine. Whatever he knew, whatever was going on in his head, it was tearing him apart. But what could I say? Big Brother had made his decision, and who was I to question it? Yet, the idea of him living as a mortal, vulnerable, and without his godlike powers didn't sit right with me. It felt wrong on so many levels. Big Brother, are you sure about this? The question slipped out before I could stop it, my voice cracking with uncertainty. He looked at me with a calm that only made my unease grow. Yes, Veldora, I'm certain. Rudra's POV. Shock didn't even begin to cover what I felt when Veldanava made his announcement. Lucia pregnant, Veldanava giving up his power. It was like the world had been turned upside down. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, suddenly felt uncertain, fragile. I looked at Rimuru, searching for some kind of reaction that made sense, but what I saw in his eyes only deepened my confusion. There was something he wasn't telling us, something he knew that we didn't. The tension in his posture, the frustration in his eyes. It was as if he was on the verge of breaking. I wanted to ask Veldanava if he was truly sure about this, but the words felt hollow. He was Veldanava, the ultimate authority. If he'd made up his mind, then there was nothing any of us could do to change it. But the uncertainty gnawed at me, the fear of what this meant for the world, for all of us. Veldanava, I started, my voice rough with the weight of the moment. Are you truly certain this is the path you want to take? He met my gaze, his eyes filled with a calm resolve that shook me to my core. Yes, Rudra, he replied. This is the life I choose. Guy's POV. Lucia pregnant, Veldanava giving up his power. It was like a joke, a story that was too absurd to be real. But the look in Veldanava's eyes told me it was no joke. He was serious. The room was thick with disbelief, but also something else. A sense of awe, maybe, or dread. Veldanava was stepping down, choosing to live as a mortal? The world was about to change in ways none of us could predict. I glanced at Rimuru, expecting him to be as shocked as the rest of us, but what I saw on his face was something else entirely. Pain, frustration, sadness. It was all there, plain as day. The kid looked like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "What's going on in that head of yours, Rimuru?" I thought, watching as he forced a smile and offered his dry congratulations. But now wasn't the time to pry. Veldanava was the focus, and if he was really going through with this, then the world as we knew it was about to change in ways we couldn't even begin to imagine. Ignis and Frigidus's POV. Ignis and Frigidus exchanged a glance, both of them equally stunned by the revelation. As Rimuru's subordinates, they were used to following orders, used to dealing with the unexpected. But this was something else entirely. Ignis, the Fire Dragon Lord, felt a pang of worry in his chest. If Veldanava was giving up his power, what did that mean for the balance of the world? Would the true dragons still be the apex of existence, or would this signal a shift in the cosmic order? Frigidus, the Ice Dragon Lord, was more pragmatic. Veldanava's decision, while shocking, was his to make. But the implications, they were vast, and the uncertainty of what would come next made him uneasy. As they watched Rimuru, they could sense the turmoil within him. He was their lord, their leader, and yet he seemed so fragile in this moment, so burdened by something they couldn't understand. But their loyalty to him was unwavering, and so they stood by, ready to support him in whatever came next, even as the world around them seemed to shift and change in ways they could barely comprehend. Veldanava's POV. The room was heavy with tension, a weight I could feel pressing down on all of us. I had anticipated this reaction. How could I not? My siblings, my dearest ones, they had always looked to me as the pillar of our existence, the unshakable force that held everything together. And now I was stepping away, choosing a path that seemed unfathomable to them. Rimuru's eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the storm he was battling within. It pained me to see him like this, burdened by knowledge no one else could bear. But this decision was something I had to make, something that had been building within me for centuries. The longing for a simpler life, the desire to be more than just a god but to experience the world as it was meant to be experienced, as a mortal. Velgrind and Velzard's silent anguish cut through me. They had always been so strong, so fierce, yet now they were struggling with emotions that had no easy outlet. My heart ached for them, knowing that they would find it hard to understand why I was doing this. I wanted to tell them that it would be okay, that they would be fine without me, but I knew those words would offer little comfort. Lucia's hand in mine was the only source of strength I had at that moment. She had been my rock through all of this, the one who understood me in ways no one else could. She knew what this decision meant to me, and she supported it wholeheartedly. Her silent presence was a balm to the turmoil in my heart. "Thank you, everyone," I finally said, my voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside me. "I know this isn't easy to accept, but it's what I need to do. The world will go on, even without me as its guardian. Rimuru will be here, and so will you all. Together, you'll ensure that everything remains in balance." I glanced at Rimuru again, his pained expression a stark reminder of the burden he carried. He was so young, yet so much older in experience, a paradox that was difficult to reconcile. He had been through more than anyone in this room could imagine, and it weighed on him heavily. "This isn't goodbye," I continued, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. "I'm not leaving you all behind. I'm simply choosing a different path, one that will allow me to live a life I've long desired. Lucia and we will cherish the time we have left together, and I hope you can find it in your hearts to be happy for us." I knew it would take time for them to come to terms with this, but I had faith in my siblings. They were strong, resilient, and they would find a way to move forward. As for Rimuru, I could only hope that he would find peace in knowing that he was not alone in this, that he had us, even if the future seemed bleak. "Rimuru," I said softly, my gaze locking onto his, "you've always been special to me, and you always will be. No matter what happens, remember that you're not alone." We're in this together, all of us. His expression softened just a fraction, but I could still see the turmoil beneath the surface. There were no easy answers here, but I had faith that, in time, he would find his way, just as I had found mine. The future was uncertain, but with Lucia by my side and my siblings standing strong, I knew we would face whatever came our way together. Velgrind's POV. The news struck like a bolt of lightning, but I tried to keep my expression neutral, even as my mind churned with disbelief. Veldanava, our brother, the strongest of us all, was giving up his power? To live as a mortal? It made no sense. He was our leader, the one who kept balance in this world. How could he abandon that responsibility? But as I glanced at Lucia, who sat by his side with a serene expression, I realized she knew. She had known for months, yet said nothing. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling a mixture of betrayal and anger, not at Veldanava but at the situation. How could he think this was the right decision? We were true dragons, beings of immense power, and he was willingly casting that aside. My gaze flicked to Rimuru, who sat quietly, his expression unreadable. He seemed distant, lost in thoughts I couldn't comprehend. There was something off about him, something that suggested he knew more than he let on. But before I could dwell on it, Velzard's voice cut through the tension, sharp and demanding. Velzard's POV. What is the meaning of this? I asked, my voice colder than the iciest winds. My eyes narrowed at Veldanava, who had the audacity to smile as if he hadn't just dropped a bombshell. How can you abandon your duty? We need you, the world needs you. I felt a chill run down my spine, not from my own powers, but from the uncertainty that now loomed over us. Veldanava was the anchor, the one who ensured that our world didn't spiral into chaos. If he left, what would become of us? Of everything we've worked to protect? Lucia, beside him, appeared calm, too calm. She knew about this and supported him, but did she understand the gravity of what they were choosing? I turned my gaze to Rimuru, who had been silent throughout the conversation. His expression was masked, as if he was struggling with something deep within. It was unlike him to be so reserved, and that made me uneasy. Rimuru, I said, my tone demanding answers. What do you think of all this? Surely you see the danger in Veldanava's decision. He looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Regret, sorrow, and knowledge? But then it was gone, replaced by the calm demeanor he always wore. Rimuru's POV. Velzard's icy glare bore into me, and I knew she expected an answer. But what could I say? That I knew this was coming? That I knew how this all would end? Veldanava had made his choice, and nothing I could say would change that. He wanted to live as a mortal, to experience life without the burden of power, and I couldn't blame him for that. But it didn't stop the gnawing feeling in my chest, the frustration of knowing the future but being powerless to alter it. I trust Veldanava's judgment, I finally said, my voice steady, though my heart was anything but. He's always done what's best for all of us. This will be no different. Velgrind looked at me with a mix of confusion and suspicion, but she didn't press further. Velzard, however, was not so easily placated. And what about the balance of power? She demanded. If Veldanava steps down, what happens next? Who will take his place? Before I could respond, Veldanava spoke, his tone gentle yet firm. Veldanava's POV. I've thought this through, Velzard, I said, meeting her icy gaze with warmth. Rimuru will take my place as the guardian of God's mountain. He has the strength and the wisdom to protect what we hold dear. The room fell silent as everyone processed my words. I could see the tension in their faces, the fear of the unknown. But this was my choice, my path, and I would walk it no matter what. As for the balance of power, I continued, the world will adapt as it always has. My decision isn't made lightly, but it's what I want. I hope you all can understand and support me in this. Velgrind and Velzard exchanged glances, their worry evident, but they didn't argue further. I knew they were concerned, but I also knew they trusted me, even if they didn't agree with my choice. But Rimuru, I could see the turmoil in his eyes, the struggle to accept what he knew was coming. He had seen the future, and it weighed heavily on him. I wished I could ease that burden, but I knew I couldn't. This was a path we all had to walk, and Rimuru would have to find his own way through it. Lucia's POV. I reached out, placing a hand on Veldanava's arm, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath my fingers. I knew this wasn't easy for him or for any of us, but it was a decision we had made together, one I believed in with all my heart. I know this is hard to accept, I said softly, looking around the room at the faces of those who had become our family. But Veldanava and I have decided to live a different life, one where we can be together without the burden of power. We ask for your understanding and support in this. The silence was heavy, each of them lost in their thoughts. I could see the sadness in Rimuru's eyes, the frustration in Velzard's, and the concern in Velgrind's. But I also saw love, a deep bond that tied us all together. We will always be here for you, I continued, but in a different way. Please, trust us. Velgrind sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing just a bit. Velzard remained stiff, her eyes narrowed, but I could see the conflict within her. Rimuru gave a small nod, his expression unreadable, but I knew he was struggling with more than just our decision. He carried the weight of knowledge that none of us could fathom, and I wished I could ease his pain. In that moment, I felt the full weight of what we were asking of them, to accept our choice and to continue on without Veldanava's power guiding them. But I also knew that this was the right path for us, and I hoped in time they would see that too. Rimuru's POV. The tension in the room slowly dissipated as the reality of Veldanava's decision began to sink in. The shock gave way to a reluctant acceptance, and I could see the subtle shifts in everyone's expressions. Velgrind sighed, her shoulders relaxing, while Velzard's icy demeanor softened just a bit. They were sad, of course, but as Lucia's pregnancy was brought to the forefront, that sadness mixed with an overwhelming sense of joy. "Congratulations, Lucia," Velgrind said. Her voice warmed despite the lingering uncertainty in her eyes. "A child? It's wonderful news." Velzard, who had been so stern moments ago, now looked at Lucia with a rare, gentle smile. "You'll make a wonderful mother," she added, her voice holding a note of genuine affection. Lucia beamed, her happiness radiating through the room. "Thank you, all of you. It means so much to us." The atmosphere shifted, the previous tension dissolving as they all rallied around the joyous news of Lucia's pregnancy. Veldanava, who had been the source of so much concern, now stood beside his wife, his arm around her, basking in the collective warmth of their congratulations. Despite their earlier reservations, they all seemed genuinely happy for him and Lucia. A party was quickly arranged, the mood in the room turning from somber to celebratory. Wine was poured, and laughter filled the air as the initial shock of Veldanava's announcement faded into the background. I joined in, my usual playful demeanor returning as I engaged in light-hearted banter with Veldora and the others. But beneath my laughter, my mind was working, calculating. I felt a grin creep onto my face. Not my usual mischievous smirk, but a genuine one. I was thinking about something big. Veldanava's choice to live as a mortal had set off a chain of thoughts in my head. Could I change things? The future was not set in stone. Not yet. And if I played my cards right, maybe, just maybe, I could create a future where Veldanava wouldn't have to give up everything. A future where I could save him, where I could prevent the tragedies I knew were coming. I looked around at the others, who were now laughing and celebrating with abandon. They had no idea what was going through my mind, and for now, that was how I wanted it. The responsibility I carried was immense, but it also filled me with a sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let things end the way I knew they would. Not if I could help it. But for now, I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the present, joining in on the celebration with renewed energy. The future could wait just for a little while longer. Velgrind's POV. As the party got into full swing, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of emotions. I was genuinely happy for Lucia and Veldanava, especially for the new life they were bringing into this world. A child, It was a miracle in its own right. But there was still that lingering sadness, a quiet ache in my heart knowing that Veldanava, our leader and brother, was stepping down from his role as the strongest among us. Still, I smiled and toasted to their happiness, trying to push aside my worries. Veldanava had always been the one to lead us, to guide us through the trials of this world. If this was what he truly wanted, then who was I to question it? But it didn't stop the gnawing fear of what might happen without him. The world without Veldanava's strength seemed wrong. But tonight wasn't the night for such thoughts. Lucia's smile was so bright, so full of life, that it was impossible not to be caught up in her joy. We would deal with the future when it came. For now, we celebrated. Velzard's POV. I watched as Veldanava laughed and joked with the others, his arm around Lucia as they reveled in the well wishes. It was hard to stay angry when I saw the happiness in his eyes, but that didn't mean I was entirely at ease with his decision. Giving up his power felt like an abandonment, but it was his choice. Still, as much as I wanted to hold onto my frustration, it melted away as the celebration continued. Lucia's pregnancy was a light in the darkness, a beacon of hope that we all needed. The thought of a new life, of Veldanava and Lucia's child, brought a warmth to my heart that I hadn't felt in a long time. As I toasted with the others, I couldn't help but glance at Rimuru. There was something different about him tonight, a glint in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It was like he was planning something big. But when I met his gaze, he just grinned and raised his glass, his usual playful self. Whatever was going through his mind, I trusted that it was for the best. After all, Rimuru had proven time and again that he was more than capable of handling whatever came his way. Lucia's POV. I was overwhelmed with the outpouring of love and support from everyone. Despite the initial shock, they all came together to celebrate our joy, and I couldn't have been happier. Veldanava stood by my side, his hand on my shoulder, and I felt the strength of our bond, of our shared commitment to this new life we were bringing into the world. The sadness I had seen in Velgrind and Velzard's eyes earlier had given way to smiles, and I knew they were genuinely happy for us. It was a relief to know that they supported us despite their reservations. And Rimuru, he was as enigmatic as ever, but I saw the warmth in his eyes as he congratulated us. For a moment, I thought I saw something else there, something deeper, more intense, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by his usual playful grin. Whatever it was, I trusted that Rimuru would share it with us when the time was right. Veldora's POV. Kuhahaha. This is great. A party for my brother and sister-in-law, and they're having a kid too. I was in high spirits, downing drink after drink and dragging Rimuru into the fun. He seemed to be thinking about something serious, but that didn't stop him from keeping up with my antics. That guy always has something up his sleeve, but whatever it is, I know it'll be awesome. I grabbed Rimuru by the shoulder, pulling him into another toast. To the future. Whatever it brings, we'll take it on together, right? Rimuru just grinned at me, that same mischievous grin that always meant something big was coming. I couldn't wait to see what it was. Whatever it was, I knew it would be legendary. Guy's POV. I watched the scene unfold, leaning back in my chair, a smirk playing on my lips. Veldanava's announcement had shocked everyone, but now that the initial shock had worn off, I could see the acceptance settling in. It was amusing, really, to see the great Veldanava stepping down to live a mortal life. Who would have thought? But then again, he always was a bit unpredictable. My eyes flicked over to Rimuru. That little enigma was up to something, I could tell. His grin was a dead giveaway. He was usually more transparent with his mischief, but tonight, there was something deeper at play. He was thinking big, probably about something that could shake the foundations of the world. And that intrigued me. I sipped my drink, keeping an eye on him. Whatever Rimuru had in mind, it was bound to be entertaining. After all, chaos was what made life interesting, and Rimuru was a master at stirring up chaos. I couldn't wait to see what he would do next. Rudra's POV. As I sat there, listening to Veldanava's announcement, a mixture of emotions washed over me. On one hand, I was happy for my sister and Veldanava. They deserved this happiness, this chance at a normal life. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the sense of loss that came with Veldanava giving up his power. He was our leader, our guiding star. Without him, what would become of us? What would become of the Eastern Empire? I glanced at Rimuru, who seemed to be deep in thought, a grin on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something he wasn't telling us, something important, but I trusted Rimuru. He had proven himself time and time again, and if anyone could handle the unknown, it was him. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at me. The future was a precarious thing, and without Veldanava's power, it felt even more so. But I forced myself to push those thoughts aside for now. This was a celebration, and Lucia deserved to enjoy it without the weight of our worries. I would deal with the implications of Veldanava's decision later. For now, I raised my glass and joined in the toasts, determined to make this a night of joy, not sorrow. Ignis POV. Seeing the shock in the room, I couldn't help but feel a wave of respect for Veldanava. It took incredible strength to give up the kind of power he had, all for the sake of living a mortal life. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the sense of loss that came with it. Veldanava was more than just our leader. He was the foundation upon which so much was built. I glanced over at Rimuru, my lord, who seemed to be lost in thought, a grin playing on his lips. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who had a plan, someone who was ready to challenge the future, no matter how uncertain it was. It reassured me in a way that words couldn't. Whatever was coming, whatever changes were on the horizon, I knew that Rimuru would be at the center of it, guiding us with his usual mix of confidence, playfulness, and that deep sense of responsibility he always carried, even when he pretended not to. I joined in the celebrations, raising my glass to Lucia and Veldanava. They deserved this happiness, and I would do everything in my power to support Rimuru in whatever path he chose to take us down. Frigidus POV. The announcement hit me like a cold wind. Veldanava giving up his power? I could hardly believe it. As someone who had always been calculated and precise, I found the idea difficult to grasp. But then again, Veldanava was always full of surprises. I observed Rimuru from across the room, noting the way he seemed to be lost in thought, his usual playful demeanor slightly tempered by something more serious. There was something in his eyes, something that spoke of plans and strategies, of a future that only he could see. It made me curious and a little uneasy. Rimuru was unpredictable, but he was also brilliant. If he was thinking of something that could change the future, then it was bound to be something big. And whatever it was, I would follow him. For now, though, I allowed myself to relax, to join in the celebrations. Lucia and Veldanava deserved this moment of happiness, and I wouldn't let my concerns overshadow that. But even as I raised my glass in a toast, I couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was on the horizon, something that Rimuru was already preparing for. Rimuru's POV thoughts. As I watched everyone finally let go of their initial shock and start to truly celebrate, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was joy, of course, for Lucia and Veldanava, but there was also a deep-seated sense of anticipation. The future was uncertain, and yet, that uncertainty filled me with a kind of excitement that I hadn't felt in a long time. I was thinking of something big, something that could change everything. I knew what was coming, the tragedies and the losses, but I also knew that I had the power to change it. I could create a future where we didn't have to lose those we loved, where Veldanava didn't have to give up everything. I glanced around the room at all the people I cared about and made a silent vow to myself. Whatever it took, I would protect them. I would create a future where we could all be together, where we didn't have to sacrifice so much. And as I thought about it, a genuine grin spread across my face, the kind of grin that comes when you know something no one else does. The future was mine to shape, and I was going to make sure it was a future worth fighting for. But for tonight, I would celebrate. There would be time for plans and strategies later. For now, I raised my glass one last time and joined in the laughter and joy of the moment, content in the knowledge that I was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 10. Despair. The Aftermath. Third-person POV. After the gathering, the attendees slowly dispersed, returning to their respective domains. They congratulated Lucia, and the atmosphere brimmed with a blend of happiness and a quiet sorrow for Veldanava's decision to give up his powers. Even so, they celebrated. Yet, beneath the surface, an unsaid tension lingered, like a shadow that couldn't quite be banished. Rimuru's POV. It's been more than half a decade since Malim was born. In those years, the world had remained relatively peaceful. Nothing of major importance had transpired, at least not on the surface. When Malim came into this world, I was there, standing by Veldanava's side. I didn't stay long, but I remember the moment clearly, Malim's first cry, and the pride in Veldanava's eyes as he named her Malim Nava. It was then that I saw it, the transfer of energy, and the immense toll it took on Veldanava. More than half of his energy was drained, his body destabilizing. With the last of his old body's power, Veldanava created a sibling for Malim, a baby dragon to keep her company, ensuring she never felt the loneliness that he once did. But by the time he finished, Veldanava's new incarnation was almost entirely human, weak compared to his former draconic self. Before I left, I gave Malim a small sterling silver dragon pendant. It wasn't just a trinket. It was a protective charm, imbued with the void energy I had mastered. No dominance magic would work against her while she wore it. It was for her safety and hers alone. I know Malim is strong, that no one can control her, but it eased my mind knowing she had some protection. That was the last time I visited, and I've kept my distance since, letting them live their lives. Now, I find myself in the dense forest of God's mountain, training in isolation. Not in physical combat or magic, those were already second nature to me, but in something more intricate, refining new techniques using the void energy I now control with precision, thanks to my ultimate skill, Chaos Lord of the Void. The garden surrounding my home is tranquil, a sanctuary nestled within the heart of the forest. The gentle rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, and the soothing scent of blooming flowers create a perfect harmony with the silence of the wilderness. I sit here often, sipping tea, letting the stillness calm the storm within my mind. Across from me, Ignis and Frigidus enjoy the peace, their normally intense expressions softened by the moment. Ciel, who now has a body of her own thanks to Veldanava, moves with grace as she serves us, her presence a comforting constant. But this peace is fleeting. A sudden, violent surge of emotion crashes through me like a tidal wave. Anger, pain, sorrow. All at once, overwhelming and suffocating. The teacup slips from my hand, shattering against the table as I stand abruptly. The world around me blurs, everything else fading into the background as I struggle to control the flood of emotions threatening to tear me apart. I grit my teeth, my fists clenched at my sides. Something is terribly wrong. My eyes flick to Ignis and Frigidus, who immediately sense the change in me. They drop to their knees, their faces a mixture of fear and concern as they feel the terrifying aura I'm unconsciously releasing. The forest itself seems to hold its breath, the air thick with tension and the weight of my power. I desire it, now. I command, my voice cold and devoid of warmth. The words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken intent. Without hesitation, they rise to their feet, their expressions hardening as they bow deeply before taking flight. They understand my unspoken order, their loyalty unwavering as they vanish into the sky, set on fulfilling my command. As I watch them disappear into the distance, a cold determination settles within me. The future is a fragile thing, easily altered by the choices we make. And I have just made one that will ripple across time, altering the path ahead. For now, all I can do is wait. Wait and prepare for whatever is coming, because deep down, I know this is just the beginning. Third-person POV. The skies above the Eastern Empire were clear, a deep blue that mirrored the calm Veldanava had finally found in his life. After centuries of overseeing the world, the former god had stepped down, embracing a simpler existence with his beloved wife, Lucia, and their precious daughter, Malim. In the capital of Nazca, life was peaceful. Veldanava enjoyed the laughter of his child, the warmth of his wife's hand in his, and the ordinary joys he had long been denied. But this peace was fragile, a thin veil over the dangerous world he had once controlled. Far to the north, Rudra, Veldonava's brother-in-law, was locked in a fierce battle with Guy Crimson, the formidable demon lord. The clash of their titanic powers sent ripples through the fabric of the world, a distant reminder of the chaos that still existed. Rudra fought with all his might, driven by an unrelenting will to prove himself against Guy. He was unaware that this confrontation, far from home, would leave his own kingdom vulnerable. As Rudra and Guy exchanged devastating blows, the Eastern Empire's defenses weakened. This was the moment a rival nation had been waiting for. Hidden in the shadows, biding their time, they struck. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the heart of Nazca. Shadows moved in the alleys, figures cloaked in darkness, their eyes filled with malice and purpose. The streets, usually filled with the sounds of life, began to quiet as the enemy moved closer to their target. Their goal was clear: to destabilize the Eastern Empire by eliminating its strongest pillars, Veldonava and Lucia. Veldonava, ever vigilant despite his new life of peace, sensed the disturbance. His connection to the world, though weakened by choice, still pulsed with warning. He rose from his seat, his brow furrowed with concern. Lucia, always attuned to her husband's moods, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Something's wrong," Veldonava murmured, his voice tense. Lucia nodded, her gaze sharpening. "I feel it too." Suddenly, the first explosion tore through the city, shattering the tranquil day. The ground shook beneath their feet, and the distant cries of civilians reached their ears. Veldonava's heart clenched as he realized the gravity of the situation. This was no ordinary attack. It was a calculated strike against everything he held dear. "Lucia, stay close," he ordered, his voice steely with resolve. But Lucia, ever the warrior queen, was already moving. "We fight together, as always." The city was in chaos. Flames licked at the sky, and the acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Veldonava and Lucia moved swiftly through the carnage, their powers flaring as they sought to protect the innocents caught in the crossfire. Veldonava's attacks were devastating, his wrath like a storm as he unleashed his might against the invaders. But these were no ordinary soldiers. They wielded weapons of dark magic, artifacts designed specifically to counter his divine strength. Lucia fought beside him, her movements graceful yet deadly. She summoned barriers of light to shield the fleeing civilians and struck down enemies with swift precision. Yet, for every foe they felled, more seemed to rise in their place. The attackers were relentless, their determination fueled by hatred and the promise of victory. As the battle raged on, Veldonava's mind raced. How had they breached the capital so easily? Rudra's absence weighed heavily, and he realized too late that the attack had been perfectly timed, coordinated to strike when their greatest defender was away. Veldonava's POV. The skies above the Eastern Empire were a serene blue, a mirror of the calm I had finally found in this life. After centuries spent overseeing creation, molding and maintaining the balance of the world, I had stepped down from the throne of divinity. I embraced a simpler existence, one filled with the laughter of my daughter, the warmth of Lucia's hand in mine, and the small, ordinary joys I had long been denied. For years I had sought peace, not just for the world, but within myself. I found it in the mundane moments, in the way Malim's eyes lit up at the sight of a new toy, in the gentle way Lucia would braid her hair in the mornings. This was what I had fought for, what I had sacrificed so much to protect. Yet, deep down, I knew this peace was fragile. The world I had once controlled was still full of dangers, and the power I had given up could no longer shield us from every threat. My thoughts often drifted to Rudra, my brother-in-law, who was locked in a never-ending struggle with Guy Crimson. Their battles shook the fabric of reality itself, ripples of their power echoing across the world. Rudra fought with an intensity that both worried and reassured me. His obsession with proving himself to Guy blinded him to the vulnerability he left behind. As I sat in the garden, watching Malim chase butterflies under the afternoon sun, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had settled over me. The capital of Nazca was peaceful, but it was the kind of peace that could shatter with a single misstep. Suddenly, I felt it, a disturbance, subtle but unmistakable. A shadow fell over my heart, a cold whisper that spoke of danger, of loss. I rose from my seat, my brow furrowed with concern. "Something's wrong," I murmured, my voice tense with the weight of impending doom. Lucia appeared at my side, her expression mirroring my own unease. She placed a gentle hand on my arm, her gaze sharpening with determination. "I feel it too." Before we could speak further, the ground beneath us trembled. The first explosion tore through the city, a deafening roar that shattered the tranquility of the day. The world seemed to slow as I watched the skyline fill with smoke and flame, the distant cries of civilians reaching my ears like a twisted symphony of despair. No, this couldn't be happening. "Lucia, stay close," I commanded, my voice steely as I struggled to contain the panic rising within me. But Lucia was already moving, her battle instincts kicking in. "We fight together, as always," she replied, her voice a mix of resolve and love. We moved through the chaos like twin storms, our powers blazing as we sought to protect those we could. Every attack I unleashed was a desperate attempt to stem the tide of destruction. But these invaders were no ordinary foes. They wielded weapons of dark magic, artifacts specifically designed to counter the divine strength I had once wielded with ease. Lucia fought with the grace and precision that had always amazed me. She summoned barriers of light to shield the fleeing civilians and struck down enemies with swift, deadly force. But for every foe we defeated, more seemed to rise, relentless in their assault. My mind raced. How had they breached Nazca's defenses so easily? Rudra's absence loomed large in my thoughts. This attack had been perfectly timed, coordinated to strike when our greatest protector was far away, locked in battle with Guy. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the very earth beneath us, more powerful than anything that had come before. I barely had time to react before the blast hit us. A shock wave that shattered the barrier I had thrown up in desperation. We were thrown to the ground, the force of the explosion overwhelming my weakened form. Pain seared through my body, and I struggled to rise, my vision swimming with darkness. Through the haze, I saw Lucia lying nearby, her breath shallow, her body battered and broken by the blast. A cold, paralyzing fear gripped my heart. "No, this can't be." I crawled to her side, each movement sending agony rippling through me. When I finally reached her, I took her hand in mine, feeling the faint pulse of her life slipping away. "Lucia, please stay with me." My voice trembled, the godly composure I had always maintained crumbling under the weight of despair. Lucia's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile gracing her lips as she looked at me. "Veldanava, we fought well, didn't we?" I nodded, my vision blurring with tears I hadn't shed in centuries. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you. I failed you." She shook her head slowly, tears brimming in her own eyes. "No. We protected what mattered most. Malim, she will live on." As her strength faded, I felt the world around us fading as well. The sounds of battle grew distant, the flames that consumed the city dimmed, and all I could see was Lucia, the woman who had stood by my side through everything, now slipping away from me. Just as the darkness was taking us both, two figures descended from the sky. One had crimson-red eyes and hair, his expression a mask of rage and fire. The other, with blue eyes and white hair, carried the cold fury of ice within him. Ignis and Frigidus, the loyal subordinates of Rimuru, had arrived. They moved with deadly precision, cutting down any intruder who dared to stand in their way. As they reached us, I could barely muster the strength to speak. "So, he sent you," I whispered, a weak smile forming on my lips. "Apologize to him. On my behalf, tell him I'm sorry for being a self-centered older brother." Ignis knelt beside me, his fiery gaze softening with an understanding that spoke of more than just loyalty. He reached out, and I felt the warmth of his power as he carefully took Lucia's soul from my grasp. Frigidus stood silently, his cold demeanor masking the sorrow that weighed on him as he watched the light fade from my eyes. And with that, my time ended. My soul drifted to Ignis, leaving behind a world I had once ruled, now broken by my own hubris. Lucia's POV. The world was spinning, a whirlwind of smoke, fire, and pain. My body felt numb, every movement a Herculean effort. I could barely see through the haze of destruction, the once familiar streets of Nazca now unrecognizable amidst the chaos. Veldanava's voice reached me through the turmoil, a beacon of warmth in the freezing cold of my despair. Lucia. His voice was strained, heavy with the weight of his own agony. I tried to respond, to reach out to him, but my strength was slipping away. The pain in my chest was intense, yet I found solace in his presence, in the certainty that, despite everything, we were together. I turned my head, catching a glimpse of him. His eyes, once so full of vitality, were now shadowed with a mixture of fear and helplessness. He crawled toward me, his movements labored, and I tried to muster a smile, wanting to reassure him even in these dire moments. "We fought well, my love," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. The words felt so small, so insignificant against the backdrop of our struggle. But they were the only comfort I could offer. He grasped my hand, his grip strong despite his weakened state. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you." The tears in his eyes mirrored my own, and I shook my head gently. "We protected what mattered most. Malim, she will live on." My vision dimmed as I spoke, the light of consciousness flickering like a candle in a storm. As the distant sounds of battle continued to rage, I felt the cold embrace of darkness closing in. The city was falling apart around us, but in Veldanava's arms, amidst the wreckage and despair, I found a semblance of peace. We had fought valiantly, had given everything for the world we loved, and now, in our final moments, we held on to each other. Ignis's POV. The call came through, urgent and fraught with tension. I sensed the disturbance even before the order reached me, an overwhelming wave of despair and chaos that pierced through my calm. It was more than just a disturbance. It was a cry for help, a plea from my master that I could not ignore. With Frigidus by my side, we soared through the sky, our dragon forms cutting through the air with unrelenting speed. The sight below was one of utter devastation. Nazca, the heart of the Eastern Empire, was in ruins, a smoldering wasteland of what once was. The city's defenders had fought bravely, but their efforts had been futile against the onslaught that had been unleashed. I could see the wreckage, the smoke rising in dark columns, and my heart sank. We had arrived too late to prevent the destruction, but we could still save what remained. Descending into the chaos, I saw the figures of the attackers, their dark magic weaving through the debris, spreading further devastation. Frigidus and I moved with precision, our combined powers cutting through the enemies with ruthless efficiency. Every strike, every blast of fire and ice, was a testament to our loyalty to Rimuru and our commitment to protecting those under our charge. Finally, we reached Veldanava and Lucia. The sight of them, battered and broken, was almost too much to bear. Veldanava, despite his weakened state, tried to offer Lucia's soul to me. The weight of his final act, of the love and sacrifice it represented, was immense. He passed Lucia's soul to me, his eyes filled with a sadness that pierced through me. "Tell him I'm sorry," Veldanava whispered, his voice fading. "Apologize for being a self-centered older brother." I nodded, taking the soul into my hands as Veldanava's form began to fade. He was gone, and Lucia's soul followed him into the afterlife, their final moments together a poignant reminder of the love that had been lost. But the battle wasn't over. As we prepared to leave, intruders launched a final, desperate assault. Frigidus responded with swift precision, his icy powers freezing the attackers in place, their cries of terror echoing through the ruined streets. Our mission was clear: protect, retrieve, and return. With the souls of Veldanava and Lucia safely secured, Frigidus and I took to the sky, our hearts heavy with the weight of our loss. The night was dark, the path ahead uncertain. But our duty remained. Return to Rimuru, deliver the news, and prepare for the inevitable consequences of this devastating turn of events. Frigidus's POV. As Ignis and I flew through the shattered remains of Nazca, the enormity of the situation settled upon us like a crushing weight. The city was a shadow of its former self, reduced to ashes and ruin. The dark magic that had been used against the Eastern Empire was unlike anything I had seen before, an abomination of power that sought to annihilate everything in its path. The souls of Veldanava and Lucia, entrusted to us, were a solemn burden. Their lives had been extinguished in an instant, their legacy now carried by the protective charm of their daughter, Malim. I could feel the energy of their souls, a gentle yet intense force that spoke of their love and sacrifice. As we returned to Rimuru, the icy rage within me was a stark contrast to the calm exterior I maintained. The attackers had been relentless, their hatred palpable, and their success a testament to their cruelty. I would see to it that their actions did not go unanswered. The journey back was swift, but every moment felt like an eternity. The weight of our mission pressed heavily on me, the responsibility to report what had transpired and to prepare Rimuru for what was to come. The silence between Ignis and me was filled with unspoken grief, each of us processing the loss in our own way. When we finally landed, the familiar sight of Rimuru's abode did little to comfort me. I approached with the souls in hand, the gravity of the news we bore pressing down on us. This was not just a report of loss. It was a call to action, a signal that the peace we had once known was irrevocably shattered. Rudra's POV. The battle with Guy Crimson had been intense, the clash of our powers echoing across the skies. Every strike, every maneuver was a testament to my strength and resolve. But as the fight progressed, an unfamiliar, gnawing sensation began to claw at my consciousness. It was a dark premonition, a sense of impending loss that made my heart ache with a depth of sorrow I couldn't fully comprehend. I stumbled, a sharp pain slicing through me. Guy's attacks continued, but my focus was shattered, my thoughts consumed by the cold realization of something terrible happening back home. The battlefield became a blur, the cries of war fading as I felt the pull of my grief. As I made my way back to Nazca, the sight that greeted me was beyond anything I had feared. The capital was in ruins, the once great city now a smoldering wasteland. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the destruction. Buildings collapsed, flames still raging, and the echoes of a city that had been torn apart by forces beyond our control. I searched desperately, my heart pounding as I navigated the devastation. The remnants of the Eastern Empire lay shattered, a grim testament to the attack that had been orchestrated. The sight of the fallen, the lifeless forms of Veldanava and Lucia, was a blow to my very soul. I had failed them, failed to protect my family, and the weight of that failure was crushing. Kneeling amidst the rubble, the grief was overwhelming. My tears mixed with the dust of the city, and the anguish was a raw, unfiltered wound that refused to heal. The realization that Veldanava and Lucia were gone was a heavy blow, the impact of their loss reverberating through every fiber of my being. In the midst of my sorrow, I vowed to avenge their deaths. The darkness that had claimed my family would not go unpunished. But for now, I was left with the emptiness of loss, the shattered remnants of a world that would never be the same. Ignis and Frigidus's return. Third-person POV. As Ignis and Frigidus returned to Rimuru's residence, the weight of their mission and the loss they carried were palpable. The silence was heavy, filled with the unspoken understanding of the gravity of the situation. The air hummed with tension, anticipating the revelation they were about to bring. Rimuru stood waiting, his demeanor calm but his eyes sharp with concern. As they approached, a pang of sorrow hit both subordinates for the burden they were about to place on him. The souls of Veldanava and Lucia, the remnants of a great legacy, were now a part of his responsibility. Ignis stepped forward, presenting the souls with a solemn nod. "Master, we have returned," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "The city of Nazca has fallen. Veldanava and Lucia, they have perished." Their souls are with you now." The news was met with a profound silence, the weight of their words settling heavily in the air. Rimuru's expression shifted, his eyes darkening as he took in the magnitude of the loss. The peaceful facade of his home, the sanctuary he had built, seemed to dissolve in the face of the tragedy that had unfolded. Rimuru's reaction was a complex mix of emotions: anger, grief, and a deep, resonant sorrow. He turned away, his thoughts clearly racing as he processed the enormity of the situation. Rimuru's POV. The silence in my house was oppressive, a heavy blanket that stifled even the smallest breath. The tea I had poured for myself sat untouched, the steam long since dissipated. It was a ritual I had begun after years of quiet mornings, a small comfort in a world where I already knew every ending before it began. But this time the ritual felt empty. I had sensed their passing long before Ignis and Frigidus returned, but the foreknowledge did little to soften the blow. Despite all my power, despite the inevitability I had prepared myself for, the reality of their absence hit me like a blow to the chest. The world felt colder, lonelier. When Ignis and Frigidus finally arrived, the gravity of what they had witnessed clung to them like a shadow. The usual spark in Ignis's eyes was dulled, replaced by a sorrow that mirrored the quiet desolation in his heart. Frigidus, always stoic, now seemed even more distant, his expression a mask of frozen grief. They landed in the garden without a word, their wings folding behind them as they approached me, their movements slow, burdened by the weight of their mission. Ignis stepped forward, extending his hand. Resting in his palm were glowing blue orbs of light, pulsing softly with the remnants of what once was Veldanava and Lucia. The light flickered gently, a final heartbeat of what they had been, a fading warmth that was now all that remained of two lives entwined with my own. "We have completed the task, Master," Ignis said, his voice stripped of its usual fire. There was no pride in his tone, no triumph in having fulfilled his duty, only a quiet sorrow, the bitter taste of loss. I accepted the spheres, cradling them with a tenderness that belied the turmoil raging within me. The warmth of their souls seeped into my hands, a last echo of Veldanava's indomitable spirit and Lucia's unwavering love. I closed my eyes, allowing myself a moment to feel their presence, to let their essence wash over me. It was a fleeting comfort, a reminder of what had been taken from the world. Beside me, Ciel remained silent, her gaze steady, observing. She could sense the storm within me, the battle between the fury that threatened to consume me and the rationality that I clung to. But she didn't need to ask. She knew the struggle, understood the weight of what I held in my hands. "Thank you, Ignis, Frigidus," I murmured, the words coming out softer than I intended. "You've done well." They bowed, accepting my gratitude, but I could see the frustration simmering beneath the surface, the anger that neither of them could fully hide. They were warriors, bred for battle, and this loss, this inability to protect what was dear, gnawed at them like a festering wound. "Master," Frigidus began, his voice as cold as the ice he commanded, "shall we eliminate those responsible for this?" I looked up, meeting his gaze, and for a moment, the darkness within me surged. The urge to destroy, to wipe out every trace of those who dared to harm Veldanava, was almost overwhelming. My fingers tightened around the spheres, and I could feel the energy within responding, glowing brighter, as if sensing my turmoil. But no, not now. "No," I said, my voice firm despite the maelstrom inside me. "Not now." Frigidus's eyes narrowed, a flicker of discontent crossing his otherwise impassive face. But he didn't argue. He knew better than to question me, especially in moments like this. Ignis, too, held back, though I could see the battle within him, the struggle to contain the fire that begged to be unleashed. "We are not the ones who will take vengeance," I continued, my voice hardening, every word deliberate. "Their fate is already sealed by another's hand. There will be a time for retribution, but that time is not now." They both nodded, though the tension in their bodies betrayed their desire for action. But they were loyal, bound to me by more than just duty. They understood the need for patience, even when it burned them from the inside. Ciel stepped closer, her presence a balm to the rawness of my emotions. "What will you do now, master?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with concern. I turned to her, seeing the worry in her eyes. She knew the weight I carried, the responsibility that came with the knowledge of what was to come. This was a moment that had been long in the making, a consequence of choices made far beyond the present. "I'm going to take care of this," I replied, my gaze dropping to the spheres in my hands. "Then we'll prepare for what's to come." The decision was made, the course set. I rose from my seat, the spheres cradled carefully in my grasp. With a deep breath, I tapped into the void within me, opening the space where time and reality were mine to command. The spheres vanished from sight, stored safely away where they could recover, where they could rest until the time was right. Transforming into my true dragon form, I spread my wings and ascended into the sky. The air was cool, crisp against my scales, as I flew toward Veldanava's garden atop God's mountain. The flight was short, but it gave me the time I needed to wrestle with the storm inside me. The rage, the sorrow, they warred within, threatening to break free. But I couldn't afford that. Not now. The garden was serene, untouched by the chaos below. I landed gently, folding my wings as I settled on the ground. The familiar scents of the flowers, the soft rustle of leaves, the tranquil atmosphere. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I needed this space, this calm, to regain control. Lying down, I closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion wash over me. Veldanava's garden had always been a place of peace, a sanctuary from the demands of the world. Here I could let go, if only for a moment. The souls of Veldanava and Lucia needed time to heal, to recover from the damage inflicted upon them. When the time was right, I would bring them back. But until then, I would wait and I would prepare. Sleep claimed me, a deep, dreamless slumber, as the world outside continued to turn. Ignis's POV. The sight of Rimuru transforming into his dragon form and taking to the skies was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. His departure left an emptiness in the garden, a silence that gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. I wanted to follow, to ensure his safety, to do something, anything, to ease the turmoil I knew he was feeling. But before I could move, Ciel's voice cut through my intentions like a blade. "Give the master some space," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. "He requires time to compose himself." "But," I began, the protest rising unbidden, driven by my anxiety and need to act. "If you are concerned for the master, then go to Veldanava's garden gate and ensure its protection," she interjected, her words final, her form vanishing into thin air as quickly as she had appeared. Frustration clawed at me, but I knew better than to disobey. Glancing at Frigidus, I saw my own disquiet mirrored in his icy blue eyes. Neither of us could shake the tension, the helplessness that came with knowing our master was suffering and being unable to ease that burden. We exchanged a look, an unspoken agreement passing between us. Without another word, we both took to the skies, our wings beating in unison as we ascended to the gate of Veldanava's garden. We would guard it with our lives, ensuring that no one disturbed the peace Rimuru so desperately needed. For now, this was the only way we could serve him. The time for vengeance would come, but today our task was to protect. And protect we would, with every ounce of strength and loyalty we possessed. Third-person POV. The weeks that passed after Veldanava and Lucia's deaths were a blur of silent grief and uneasy anticipation. Rimuru had withdrawn from the world, slumbering peacefully in the sacred garden atop God's mountain. The garden, once a symbol of life and harmony, now stood as a solemn vigil to the fallen gods. The air was thick with an unspoken sorrow, as though even nature mourned the loss of its creators. Before his death, Veldanava had placed Malim into a deep sleep, entrusting her care to one of his most loyal servants. She was too young, too innocent to bear the weight of such a tragedy. For now, she slept, unaware of the storm brewing around her, the pain and darkness that would soon engulf her world. Days turned into nights, And when Malim finally stirred from her enchanted slumber, the world had already changed beyond recognition. The servants had cared for her diligently, attending to her every need, but they could not shield her from the truth forever. Her uncle, the king, had refused to see her, consumed by his own grief and guilt. The vibrant kingdom, once filled with light and laughter, had grown quiet and cold, reflecting the emptiness in its ruler's heart. Gaia, the baby dragon, became Malim's only companion in those days of growing loneliness. The bond between them, always strong, deepened as they clung to each other for comfort and solace. The small dragon, unaware of its own lineage and the weight it now carried, remained by Malim's side through every moment of her grief. They were each other's world, the last remnants of a family that had been torn apart. As time passed, Malim began to grasp the reality of her parents' deaths. The once carefree dragon princess was now burdened with the knowledge of loss, the sorrow of a child who had been forced to grow up too soon. Gaia became her anchor, the one being who could still bring a smile to her face, even as tears welled in her eyes. But peace was fleeting in a world filled with envy, greed, and malice. Malim and Gaia were resting by a tranquil lake, the water shimmering under the pale light of a sun that seemed hesitant to fully shine. Gaia, as always, was playing nearby, his joyful roars filling the air as he chased after small creatures, his tiny wings fluttering in clumsy excitement. Malim watched him with a bittersweet smile, her heart swelling with a love that was tinged with sorrow. A group from the super magic kingdom of the elves had infiltrated the kingdom of Nazca with a sinister plan. Their goal was to capture Malim and harness her immense power for their own purposes, believing it would grant them dominance over all others. Their movements were stealthy, their intentions hidden beneath layers of magic and deceit as they approached their target. Malim, blissfully unaware of the impending threat, was alone when the attack began. Gaia, ever vigilant, sensed the danger before it fully descended. The young dragon stood protectively before her, its usually playful demeanor replaced by a fierce determination. Gaia's small yet formidable body bristled with energy, ready to defend Malim with everything it had. The battle was brutal. The elves, skilled in powerful, ancient magics, unleashed their might upon the little dragon, their eyes cold and unyielding. But Gaia, despite its size and youth, fought valiantly. Every blast of magic hurled at them was met with Gaia's own counterattacks, its roars echoing through the air like thunder. For a moment, it seemed as though the brave dragon might prevail, that it might hold them off long enough for Malim to escape. But the odds were against them. The elves, relentless in their assault, eventually overpowered Gaia. A final, devastating blow struck the young dragon down, its body crumpling to the ground with a heart-wrenching cry. Malim, who had been frozen in shock, watched in horror as the only family she had left, the one creature who had stayed by her side through everything, lay still before her. Gaia! Malim's voice rang out, filled with terror and disbelief, as she watched the magic strike the small dragon. The force of the blow sent Gaia crashing to the ground, a pained roar escaping his lips as his body crumpled under the impact. Malim was at his side in an instant, her hands trembling as she reached out to him. No, Gaia, no. Her voice cracked, her heart breaking at the sight of her beloved companion lying wounded before her. Gaia's breaths came in ragged gasps, his once vibrant eyes now clouded with pain and confusion. Malim's magic flared to life as she desperately tried to heal him, her power surging through her hands as she poured every ounce of her energy into the spell. But it was no use. The dark magic that had struck Gaia was too potent, too corrupting. The wounds were too deep, too fatal. Gaia's breathing grew fainter, each breath a struggle against the inevitable. Tears streamed down Malim's face as she cradled Gaia's head in her lap, her vision blurred by grief. Please, Gaia, stay with me. Don't leave me too. Her voice was a desperate whisper, a plea that echoed through the empty landscape. Gaia looked up at her, his gaze soft and filled with a heartbreaking innocence. He didn't understand why this was happening, why the world had suddenly become so cruel. But he trusted Malim, even in his final moments, his small body relaxing as he nestled closer to her. And then, with one last, shuddering breath, Gaia went still. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still with him. The lake, the trees, the sky. Everything was silent, as if holding its breath in mourning. Malim stared down at Gaia's lifeless form, her mind refusing to accept what had just happened. The last piece of her family, the one thing that had kept her grounded in her grief, was gone. The silence that followed was deafening, pressing down on Malim like a crushing weight. And then, something inside Malim broke in that moment. The grief that had been simmering within her since the death of her parents erupted, consuming her completely. Her mind, overwhelmed by the loss, began to fracture. The world around her blurred, and all that remained was the pain. A searing, all-encompassing agony that threatened to swallow her whole. Then, the pain was joined by something else, rage. A deep, primal fury that surged up from the very core of her being. The power she had inherited from her father, Veldanava, the power she had always kept under careful control, now roared to life with a ferocity that was terrifying to behold. Her eyes, once filled with innocence and light, now burned with the intensity of a star on the verge of exploding. The elves, sensing the shift in her aura, hesitated for a brief moment, but it was already too late. Malim's mind went blank, consumed entirely by her need for vengeance. The sorrow and despair that had plagued her were swept away, replaced by a singular focus, the destruction of those who had taken everything from her. With a roar that shook the very earth, Malim unleashed her power. The ground beneath her feet cracked and splintered, and the air around her ignited with raw energy. She did not wait for the elves to strike again. In an instant, Malim was upon them, her movements a blur of speed and violence. The full extent of her wrath was terrifying to behold. Each elf who had dared to attack her, who had caused her so much pain, was obliterated with a force so absolute that nothing remained of them. Their screams were drowned out by the deafening roar of her power, the ground around them scorched and shattered by the intensity of her attack. But Malim was not satisfied with just that. Her thirst for revenge had only just begun. With Gaia's lifeless body still lying on the ground, Malim turned her gaze toward the horizon, toward the capital of the super magic kingdom. She could sense their presence, the ones who had sent these assassins, who had plotted to steal her power and had taken from her the last thing she held dear. They were there and she would make them pay. Her mind, now fully lost to the madness of her grief and rage, focused solely on one thing, revenge. She left the kingdom of Nazca behind, her destination clear. She was going to the heart of the super magic kingdom, and she would not stop until it and everyone within it was reduced to ash. And so, with the full might of her inherited power blazing around her like an unstoppable storm, Malim set out on her path of destruction, leaving a trail of devastation in her wake as she made her way to the capital of the super magic kingdom. There would be no mercy, no reprieve, only vengeance,